Hello, beautiful mummies, and welcome to another episode of the Real Mummy Podcast. Before we get started, I want to extend a sensitive content warning for today's episode. In this episode, we will be discussing postnatal depression, a topic that can be deeply emotional and potentially triggering for some of our listeners. We understand that this subject can evoke strong feelings, and it's important to us that you take care of your mental and emotional well-being. If you find this topic particularly challenging or you're not in the right headspace to listen today, please take care of yourself and consider skipping this episode. Join us next week for another topic that might be easier for you to engage with. For those who choose to stay with us, know that we approach this conversation with the utmost sensitivity and respect. We aim to shed light, offer support, and hopefully provide solace to anyone who may be struggling with or affected by postnatal depression. If you need additional resources or support, please visit our website at www.realmummypodcast.com, where we've compiled helpful links and contact information for professional help. Thank you for tuning in, and let's proceed with empathy, understanding, and compassion for all the wonderful mums listening today. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Real Mummy Podcast. I'm your host, Lucy Dalton, and today we have a truly uplifting story that highlights the beautiful complexities of motherhood. In this episode, we are joined by the amazing Sonya, who opens up about her journey through pregnancy, a breezy C-section experience, and the challenges that comes with breastfeeding. Sonya's story is a testament to resilience as she navigates the unexpected twists of having a breech baby and ultimately embracing a C-section with positivity. We'll dive into her candid reflections on postpartum life, where she bravely shares her struggles with breastfeeding and the emotional hurdles she faces. Sonya emphasises the importance of having a solid support system and how she overcame societal pressures surrounding breastfeeding while also addressing her mental health. This episode serves as a reminder that every mother's journey is unique and there is no right or wrong way to bring a child into the world. We'll break down the stigma surrounding different birth experiences and celebrate the strength found in vulnerability. So whether you're a new mum, a seasoned parent, or simply curious about the journey, you're in for an episode filled with honesty, laughter, and some valuable insights. Let's jump right in and hear Sonya's inspiring story. Hi, Son. Welcome to The Real Mummy. Thank you for coming on.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So excited. Tell us about yourself and your beautiful family.
Okay, so there's myself, there's my husband Simon, who's originally from the UK, and I'm from Australia, from a town called Bunbury, just south of Perth, and we live a little bit further south of that in this beautiful coastal town called Busselton. It's a bit of a seaside holiday destination, but it's quite a small community. And we have our little girl, Lily. She's 14 months old. So it's just the three of us at the moment. And yeah, we love living life down here, and we're at the beach all the time. And yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. Yeah.
Oh, so tell me about your pregnancy. How was your pregnancy with little Lily?
Pregnancy was so crazy. Like, honestly, the easiest thing I've ever done, to the point where I didn't even know I was pregnant for the first 10 weeks.
I'm sure so many women are so jealous hearing this right now.
I know. I've got friends who've just had really awful morning sickness and stuff. But we were in the UK, and often I would get feel a bit nauseous if I have a cup of tea on an empty stomach. And we were doing it all the time because we're going out for late night pub meals. We didn't have breakfast. And I was just God, I'm so nauseous. I need to have a biscuit or something. And I'm like, oh, my jeans are really tight. We've been trying to start the process of conceiving, and I'd come off the pill, but I was waiting for my period to come back, and it hadn't come back yet. And I was like, been 4 months, why hasn't it come back? And we came back from the UK, and I thought, oh, better just do a pregnancy test before I make an appointment and go yell at the doctor to find out why it hasn't come back. And it's oh, because I'm pregnant, that's why. And then we did the blood test, and they were like, oh, we think 10 weeks pregnant and booked me in for the scan like a few days afterwards and like, actually, you're 12 and a half weeks. It's like, wow, I just had no idea. So yeah, that was amazing, but not great on holiday because I had a fair bit of alcohol on that trip.
Oh, honestly, I reckon though most women, it's like those first 12, like the first 8 weeks drag so slow because you can't tell anyone and usually feel
Yeah,
rubbish
true.
and people are like, what's wrong with you? Like, oh, I'm just really tired and,
Yeah, and I
I'm
was just
fine.
living my best life on holiday.
Yeah, I
Did
know.
go.
Like, oh my God, that's brilliant. And the rest of your pregnancy was the same. It was just cruisy throughout.
Yeah, really cruisy. Never really had too many issues. I had COVID at 19 weeks,
Oh,
and that sucked because I couldn't take any like medication for it. I could only take Panadol, I think is the only thing I could take, and that was it. And then yeah, I had a anterior placenta, so I couldn't really like feel too much movement or anything either, so that wasn't too uncomfortable. Just like as I guess you get towards the later weeks, just tired, sore. But I exercised. I kept going to the gym till about 35 weeks. I worked until 38 weeks. Yeah, it was super crazy pregnancy.
one
Um,
woman.
yeah, it was great, but I was kind of like, this is where it's too crazy. Something's gonna go wrong.
That was my next question. So obviously you had a lovely pregnancy. Did you have any challenges?
Yes, we did. So because I had COVID at 19 weeks, my doctor wanted me to go in for a late scan that I wouldn't normally go for, to check the growth and that kind of thing. And that's when, so I did that 35 weeks, and that's when they found that she was still breech, because we knew earlier on that she was breech, but they weren't worried about it. And also because I had that placenta in the front, anytime they did like a feel, they kind of couldn't really tell where she was. But I had this thing, this is one kind of problem that I had, is I just felt like I had this big, hard rock under my right like rib cage. And anytime I'd bend down to pick something up, and then towards the end, it got to the point like even I was on the toilet trying to like bend and like wipe.
Yeah.
It was so painful because I just had this massive rock under my rib, and they thought it was her bum,
Yeah.
and her head down the bottom, but actually it was her head right under that rib cage all along. So yeah, it was after that 35-week scan, we saw that she was breech, and I was kind of like, after that appointment, the scan, I was like, okay, well, maybe there's time for her to turn. Maybe we'll talk about a C-section down the track, thinking that I still had a bit of time. But I had a doctor's appointment like 2 days later, and it was like, we're booking you in for a C-section, or we can look at trying to turn her. Like, you need to decide what you want to do. And it just was so shocking because I didn't realize that it was kind of be such a quick process. I still thought I had time on my sleeve.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was like all pretty crazy, especially while I was still at work. Like, I literally, my appointment was like 2 p.m. I just walked over to the surgery and then came back, and I like had to keep working, and I'm like, what am I going to do?
Your head is just going to explode with these decisions. And
yeah, I pretty clocked off work by that point anyway. Yeah. It was also just like I felt like all my appointments, because everything was so cruisy through the pregnancy, I felt like a lot of my appointments were a waste of time. I was like, hi, how you going? Everything's looking great. And then just like things got real very quickly, because that appointment after that scan was like booking in a C-section, talking about turning them, we were talking about risks of like, they were saying even if we are successful in turning her, you have like a higher chance of an emergency C-section anyway, because she can be in distress from that turn.
Yeah.
And then also with C-section, then they're a higher risk of needing oxygen. And the thing was that in Bustleton, they don't have like a NICU or anything. So if she needs more than like a minute or whatever of oxygen, then she would have to be flown to Perth. And like it all just sounded like it just all got really serious and quite scary, like immediately. So talking it through with like my husband and my parents, and stuff, everyone was really keen on going down the caesarean section path because they, of course, just wanted me to be safe, wanted the baby to be safe. And they were like, why bother? Let's just like cut straight to the safest option. But I felt like I kind of didn't really want to take the easy path out, even though it's definitely not like easier. Each, path is valid. But I actually had a student midwife, and she lived just over the road from me. I can see her front yard from my backyard. So I just called her over for a cup of tea to talk through it all. And she kind of just like made the point at the end of the day, like, you kind of don't even have to choose. Like, if you want to, you can book both in and see how it goes, and you can still make your decision. And I thought, okay, yeah, I don't have to decide. It's like a vaginal birth or a cesarean section. I can kind of just, book in both and see how it goes and still like make my mind up further down the track. So that's what I decided to do. So what is it? It's called an ECV.
ECV. Yeah.
What is it called? I wrote it down. It's an external cephalic version, whatever that means.
So it pretty much, doesn't it mean, so they manually move the baby? So, because obviously the same thing happened to me. With Maeve. Obviously mine was like a kind of a last minute thing though, because she was head down the whole pregnancy. Like, I stopped work early because she was literally like, she was so low. Like, when they were trying to do the growth scans, like, we can't measure her head. Her head was so low down in my pelvis, like we can't even measure her head. Like, she's so low. And I was like, I can feel her. Yeah. And then like in the morning, the midwife felt, and she's like, oh yeah, we're going to break your waters. Cause obviously I had a planned induction. They're like, yeah, we're going to break your waters. And the midwife felt like, yep, heads down, let's go. Doctor came in. Luckily the doctor had a feel. And before she broke my waters, because I've heard sometimes they don't, and she had a feel, and she looked at me, and I used to work with her in the hospital, and she was like, has this baby ever been a different way? I was like, no. And she's like, oh, I thought I felt like an arm. And I was like, what are you on about? And we were just laughing. We're like, oh, whatever, because I was like, there's no way. And then, and then they rolled in the ultrasound, and typical, because we were like, oh, I don't want to look, because we've kept this gender surprise away. So we're like, we don't want to look, and we don't. And then all of a sudden I was looking at their faces and I was like, what is it? And they're like, she's transverse. So she had come out and then spun around. So she was literally laying like sideways on my tummy. So that was her arm. They could feel it hanging down. Yeah. And I was like, how did they, because I'd felt something, and but I was like, how's that even happen? So I literally had the same options as you. It was kind of like, well, if we send you home and your waters break, they'll, the cord could come out, that's dangerous. So it's kind of like you have to stay in hospital. So they were the same, like they're literally like, let's get a cesarean. And they're like, cesarean. And I was just like you. I was like, whoa. There was so much kind of information. And then, and then they were like, well, we could do an ECV and try and move her, and then try and kind of almost grab hold of her, and then you can have another vaginal birth.
Yes.
So then they're pretty much, as they do, they kind of obviously spin her around, and then they would kind of almost grab a hold of her. And
it didn't work for her, did it?
It didn't work. So they tried, and then the doctor, and didn't work. And then same thing. But then same as you. So I spoke to my family. I rang my mum, and I was like, Mum, they want to take me for a cesarean. Mavis, the baby's flipped. And she was like, don't do the spinning, just go straight to a cesarean. Exactly. Right. Everyone was pushing just to go straight for a cesarean. And I was like, I don't know what to decide. So
And there's not that much information out there. Like when you Google an ECV, there's kind of like a general, description of what happens. But there's not really anyone talking about the actual experience, which is like, it's a pretty like crazy experience to think that someone's like actually trying to push your belly and push a baby around. So, but I did get offered, that there were more options, like that I could attempt to birth her vaginally Breech. But the thing is that Busselton wouldn't support it. Bunbury wouldn't support it. So you'd have to go to Perth. And that was just like, and I obviously I didn't want to go down that path anyway. But I know a lot of people are keen to kind of keep things as natural as possible and say that, that is still an option. And I know that's an option, but you just had to go to Perth. And that, for me, was too risky, and also like we don't have private health, and being away from family and from home and all those kinds of things. But yeah, also that the doctor talked about the success rate of it is only like 30%
Yeah.
or something. Oh, something as well I was going to mention is that the what is something like only 3% of babies are breech by 35 weeks. And
Wow.
that's crazy because so my mum had 3 kids. Her first was breech. My brother was breech. And then the rest, so she had a planned Caesar with that. And then the rest of us were Caesars after that. And then my mum's sister, my auntie, she had 3 breech babies. And they said on her cesareans, they were always like looking to see if there was like something to do with the shape of the pelvis or whatever, why they were breech. And they couldn't see anything. And then I'm like, well, then I've got one as well. Like maybe there's something hereditary going on here, because if it's only 3%, but then there's been 5 in our like immediate family now.
Oh, I've got goosebumps. That's
I wonder if something funky is going on.
Oh,
like out of
gosh.
on my mum's side, there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 grandchildren. All of us have been born by C-section.
Yeah.
So I didn't even really have any family members or anything to go to and talk about, what a vaginal birth is like.
So did you kind of ever like obviously did you ever look into a cesarean before you knew that Lily was breech, and before this was, but like did you ever kind of like, think that it could be a possibility and kind of look into it?
Not really. I was quite terrified of a vaginal birth, but I'm a researcher, I'm a planner. I try and just like be as organized as I can to try and be as informed as I can. I listened to probably about 4,000 Australian birth stories episodes when I was pregnant. I went to all the classes. I did sign up for the extra wax courses, all those things. And I just kind of found comfort in knowing a bit more how the body works to enable a vaginal birth. But I think because I was working so hard to try and get comfortable with that idea, I'd almost forgot about the C-section until they had mentioned. I was like, oh, there's hours of putting researching. But then after I found out that I might be having a C-section, I did go on to Australian Birth Stories, and a lot of this, topics around C-sections, around emergencies, there wasn't any that were elected or planned, and I really struggled to find something that just wasn't a traumatic story. Everyone had a traumatic story, and there was no just average Joe story of how it was going to look. But yeah, we'll get into that. I knew my being a small town, my GPO, she would be the one doing the Caesar, and she'd been my doctor the whole way through. My student midwife was there. It was just a real comfortable atmosphere, knowing that I had people that I knew really well and trusted really well.
So was it the GPO that performed the ECV? Sorry, we digressed a bit there. We kind of went up in a bit. But for the ECV, so how was that? So obviously you did a bit of there's not a lot of research. Was it in the hospital or was it in the GP?
Yeah, so I had to come up to Bunbury. I had another ultrasound the day before just to make sure that it was still breech in Bunbury. And then luckily my parents are there, so I stayed there overnight. And then the next day I had the ECV in the Bunbury public hospital. That was really a really interesting experience because I had an appointment for 10 a.m. or something. I got there, my husband Simon took time off work to be there with me. My student midwife was there. They put me into a room, but they were like, oh, the doctors are really busy, so they don't know when they'll see you. And we waited, I think it was for 4 hours beyond my appointment time. And it was just the nervousness of waiting and then having a nap and then watching Netflix and then getting nervous again.
Yeah.
And then it was all of a sudden, go, this doctor comes in. And this doctor, I guess they were so busy that she was so rude to the nurses and the midwives. she was polite to me, but like
Mm-hmm.
very quick. So initially when she came in and she kind of said like, yeah, we're good to go. And she kind of fired off a bunch of questions, but she was so busy. She was wanting my answers like bang there. I can't even really remember what the questions were.
Mm.
How many weeks are you? How are you feeling? When do you know you breech? Who's your GPO? All these things. And she just wanted an answer like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we kind of decided, yeah, we're going to go ahead, they gave me, is it an injection? I can't even really remember. It must have been an injection to, I guess, relax my muscles.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the worst thing about the whole thing for me, is that the injection made me feel like I had this real nervous, jittery energy, and I was like shaking.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they gave it about half an hour for it to sink in or something, but I just felt like so on edge.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the medication, not necessarily, well, I'm sure it was a bit of me as well, but
Yeah.
definitely the medication. And then the doctor came in again, and again she was rude to the staff, and it just made me feel really uncomfortable. Anyway, they started the procedure, and basically they just had, there was the doctor and either another doctor or another midwife, and they would put their hands on my belly and tried just like applied heaps of pressure around the sides, and just tried to like push her around. Simon was saying that he could like see the outline of the baby from the outside of my belly, which I couldn't see. I was just lying back trying to look up and breathe.
Did you have any pain relief?
I think there was like pain relief in that medication,
Yeah.
to like relax the muscles. There was something in there. It was painful, but it wasn't awful.
Mm-hmm.
I remember saying at the time, it's like, this is the worst massage I've ever had. Like, it was just like, it was really uncomfortable, but that's what it was like. It was like a really firm, awful massage. But I think as well, every time they tried to push her, I could feel her head under my ribs kind of like lock there.
Like,
and
they would back up. Yeah.
Yeah, they would be able to move part of the bum a bit, but her head was locked, absolutely locked there. And so that pressure against my ribs was quite painful at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I think they said they were going to try a maximum of 3 times. And I think that took maybe 20 minutes or something. It wasn't long.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, she wasn't going anywhere. After that, so I think I was 38 weeks at this point. The doctor was like, you need a C-section booked in. I said, yep, I've got one booked in for September 8th, which I would have been 39 and 4.
Mm-hmm.
And the doctor was like, no, that's way too late. It cannot be after 39 weeks, because if they didn't want the risk of me going into labor.
Yeah.
But of course, she was so busy and she was being so rude. And she was basically telling the other staff, like, you need to contact Busselton, you need to tell them that this needs to be earlier and this, and this. And they said, yep, we'll make the call, we'll say this, we'll say that. And it just was all a bit of a whirlwind, because I thought, I could go into like 42 weeks.
Yeah.
And I'd only just finished work like the 2 days before this. I might have even still been at work when this procedure happened. And they were saying, no, you're going to have it like in 3 days' time. But yeah, I got home and then I had an appointment with my GPO like 2 days after this. And I just felt like I didn't know this woman that came in to do this procedure. I didn't know her from a bar of soap.
Mm-hmm.
She was so rude, and she's demanding that it's got to be this time. My GPO, who I've seen 20 times over the last 9 months, who I know well, I trust, she's extremely well researched. Like, anytime I have a question, she's always answering with backed research and studies and all these things. I just really clicked with her really well. And I thought, if my GPO is happy with the date, then I'm happy with the date. Like, she was like, the worst that could happen is that you go into labor, you come into hospital and we give you a C-section.
Yeah.
But she is also returning from maternity leave. She's got a little boy as well, so she only works certain days. So yeah, I was happy to go with the day that she suggested. So at the end of the day, I was kind of glad that the ECV didn't work
Yeah.
because it gave me a peace of mind that I've done everything that I could do
Mm-hmm.
to go through like a natural vaginal birth.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously that wasn't in my path. So then it was like, okay, well, let's try and learn as much as we can about C-sections and move forward with that plan. Yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, I suppose it's a different thing. It's kind of, it would have been a weight lifted off your
Sure.
shoulders, because it's kind of like also like the decision is taken out of your hands. You know, before
Yeah.
that it was like, you know, ECV or C-section, but I feel like that was literally, it's like Lily took that decision from you. It was like, no, like, you know.
And that was great. That was exactly what I wanted. It took that
Yeah.
weight off my shoulders. I didn't have to make that decision. And then I knew that I'd tried those options. I think honestly, like in all my research, there just seems to be, and all my like pre-birth listening to podcasts and, different classes and all those kinds of things. There's such an emphasis of at the moment, I feel like it's a trend of doing things like as naturally as possible. And that intervention is, the cause of a lot of problems. And I just feel like that almost pushed me to be like, I have to go down the natural path.
Yeah.
And it's almost like doing the opposite of what this movement is trying to do, rather than it's like bagging out all intervention and saying you kind of putting the pressure on that you have to go down this path of being as natural as possible. And I just, like, at the minute that like my midwife and my GPO said, it's okay and you can go for a C-section and it's all going to be safe and it's all going to be fantastic. It was just like, I think that's part of the reason why I wanted to do the ECV as well, because of all this pressure of, this outside noise of things having to be natural as well. So having done that, it just took that out of my hands. I was like, well, if anyone asks why I didn't do it that way, I feel like I've got a reason. But they shouldn't people shouldn't have to have a reason why they want to do things a certain way. I mean, I've had friends who've chosen to do elective C-sections because not for any medical reason, but just because that's what they feel comfortable with, and I think that's perfectly fine. But yeah, I felt like I needed to have that like
a validation kind of thing.
That path removed for me.
I was the exact same, and I think there still is this stigma with C-sections that it's kind of, like you said, especially with now they're trying to promote the natural, like even like you hear like they're kind of like bagging out epidurals and stuff, and it's like every single birth is different. Like you like every birth is different. Like even like, like I've had friends who've had like 4 vaginal births and every single one has been different. Like you can't, and that's the thing. I feel like every birth story is empowering because every single one is different. And we, nowadays we have these kind of medical interventions so then mum and baby can be the safest they can be, instead of.
They're there for a reason.
Yeah.
And I certainly do think that, some of the argument is valid, particularly, around, I had a friend who was told that she was in the private system, she needed to be induced at 39 weeks just because that's the week that they recommended. And I was like, the induction did end up leading to quite a traumatic birth and an emergency C-section that she probably could have waited like a couple more days. She already was in labour, just, but she was put on the clock. So I do understand that there is, maybe in bigger cities, this thing of intervention can lead to other issues. But, like you say, most of the time they're there as a safe hold to protect you. I think all the time that if this was me in the 1800s or whatever, we probably would have both died. How lucky we are that we had these options available to us because, if this were us however long ago, we wouldn't have turned out the same necessarily.
It was the same with Maeve. We've said the same thing, how she flipped. And like if my waters had broke and the cord had gone, we would have lost her. So it's, and that's why we're so lucky to have these, medical, and especially being in these Western, first world countries, like even in some third world countries, like they wouldn't have these options. So I feel like we need to take this stigma out and just, at the end of the day, mum's healthy, baby's healthy, that's the most important thing.
Exactly. And to be honest, C-section was a breeze. Like my poor mother's group, we went round the circle and everyone was just like induction, traumatic birth, this traumatic birth, and I was just like, I rocked up at 7 o'clock and the baby was out at 8:15. Like it was the, I'm so grateful for having a traumatic free birth because, it's not just the birth, you've got to worry about it the afterwards. Like a lot of people have traumatic birth and then a traumatic like health issue or something happened. And we had the traumatic health issue that happened afterwards, but at least I didn't have to deal with any form of trauma or anything.
Yeah.
The birth itself was just like,
So what happened?
horrendous.
Talk me through it, because obviously mine was an emergency cesarean. For me, the ECV didn't work, so then I ended up.
Yeah.
Then I started to labour, and then it was like, oh my god, the water's going to break, so they literally raced me down to cesarean.
Yeah,
So it was just like chaos, and I was like, what is sign this, sign that, So for me, the cesarean wasn't a nice experience because it was like that. So, and nearly everyone I've spoken to has had an emergency cesarean in a similar kind of sense, So when you had, I suppose, a planned cesarean, I won't say an elective cesarean, I'll say a planned cesarean. Every time I speak to you, you're like, it was a delight. And I was like, what? What?
Tell me more.
Tell me more.
How could a birth be delightful?
So tell me exactly. Like, so obviously you woke up in the morning. How was that feeling? Knowing.
Oh, look, it was nerve-wracking knowing the date. I mean, I've never not known the date, so like I'm sure it's also nerve-wracking going like, oh, it could be any minute. Like, oh, is that it? Oh, is that it? But for me, it was great because after when we knew it was happening, I had maybe like a week and a half before the Caesar was booked in, and I like cleaned the house like crazy. There was not a drop of washing left. I did like cooked heaps and put it in the freezer. Like I could prepare as much as I could. I like went for winery lunches with my friends as driver. Simon, when we had our last Saturday before the baby came, we went for a lovely lunch and we went and just did some like sightseeing touristy stuff down here. We just had a beautiful day out. Barbecue with family was fantastic. I did like the few days before start to get really nervous about having a baby, but also nervous about being like cut open while I was away.
Yeah. And
I just was starting to get really frustrated that like women go through all these things and the men are just like, oh, you'll be fine. So it was nerve-wracking. But honestly, on the day, it was more exciting. So I had to be at the hospital. I think it was at 7. It wasn't even that early. We went to sleep. I don't know how I managed to sleep, but I did. And we both woke up around 5:30, just like naturally excited for the day. I had to have a shower with the pre-op wash, just like a bland body wash, basically. And then I got out of the shower and I took my last like bump photos.
Oh.
I love looking back at my photos. It's just, I've got so many from the day and it's just so special. I never thought that I would want photos of a cesarean birth, but my student midwife, she was just like, it was amazing. Then we left home at like, I don't know, 6:30, 20 to 7, and we stopped through the drive-through coffee shop. So I got a coffee. I couldn't drink or eat anything that like, the fact that we could stop off for coffee was great. Yeah. We got into the waiting room at about 7, and I thought like, I had my book and stuff with me. I thought we'd be sitting around for ages, but we were there for like 2 minutes before we were called in by the nurse. They asked me some questions. They gave me a gown. They gave Simon scrubs. He went and got changed. I got changed. And then I was in the kind of like pre-op waiting area by like 7:30. Wow. And my GPO rocked up and she had a quick chat with me. My student midwife was there. And then I think it was about 8 o'clock that they wheeled me in. So I'd barely been there that long. And then straight away, like we met the anaesthetist. He was like running 5 minutes late because he'd been for surf in the morning. He was just like really relaxed and casual and funny, and he was keeping us at ease quite a lot. And again, like just because I had my GPO that I've been through the whole thing with, and same as my student midwife, like just made a really comfortable experience. Also, the other midwife that was rostered on was the lady who'd done all the antenatal classes. So I'd actually met her a few times before as well. So it was nice having familiar faces. Then I think it was about 8:10, they gave me the local anesthetic in the back, which was not very pleasant, big needle, owl, but then gave me the spinal tap. And that, I was starting to get really nervous at that point. But that it just blew my mind away because they were like, it worked so fast. They're like, can you lie back down? I'm like, can't move, mate. Like, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I cannot lie back down on this. Someone's going to need to shift me because I cannot feel a thing. And I'd heard all these stories about a C-section that it feels like someone doing the dishes in your belly, they couldn't necessarily tell whether the anesthetic had worked or not. But I could tell because I get a bag of ice and they'll put it on my belly or whatever to see if I can feel, and I can feel that there's a weight on me, but I could not feel an ounce of cold. And the minute that they shifted up to my shoulder, I could feel that cold. So I knew very clearly that it was working. They put up all the drapes and things. And then my GPO, Dasna, she just goes, oh, I'm just going to put the little anesthetic rub on your belly. I was like, okay, cool, no worries. And then I started to feel my body just very gently rock side to side. And then I was like, gosh, she's been doing that for a while. She's been doing that for a few minutes. It literally had been like 3 minutes. And then she goes, here's your baby. And like pulls her out. And I didn't even realize that she had even started. I thought she was just putting the wipe on.
Yeah.
So they actually she had to tell me like 3 times, like, Sonya, here's your baby. Because I just hadn't registered that it even started yet.
Yeah.
But I've got these like amazing photos of Lily just like in all her glory, screaming and legs like, ah. It's just so beautiful. It's so amazing to have those photos, and you can't see anything gory or anything. I was very clear that I did not want to.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was also quick. So at the hospital at 7, spinal tap at 8:15, and it was 8:30. She was born 15 minutes later.
My God.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah, so I had some like a playlist on a Bluetooth speaker that they had right next to my head because I was feeling really nervous during that time. But yeah, that was super helpful. And but yeah, they just brought her out, and I was like in shock that she was there.
And she was crying, happy and healthy.
Yeah, she was, because that was the one thing that Jasna had spoken to me about, is that they have higher risk of needing oxygen. And I was quite worried about that risk of not just needing oxygen, but the emergency of needing to get a flight to Perth. Like that whole thing I found a bit concerning. But she came out kicking and screaming, and they took her straight to the little bassinet table thing, wiped her down. Simon got to cut the cord, and she was back on my chest just within a few minutes. I know I spoke to my doctor Jasna about bringing her straight to me. Not that I requested it, but I just knew from other people that was something that other people prefer. And she said, look, I prefer them to go to the cot for a quick check over. And I was like, cool, whatever you reckon, I'm happy with. And she was on me very quickly. That was just such a surreal moment, being like, this baby is on me. What the hell? And then I don't really know what happened to time after that. It's all a bit of a blur. But I did, after a while, feel a bit jittery from all the meds and that kind of thing, that I just wasn't entirely comfortable, because I'm like lying down. You can't move your arms. She's just rested very high up on my chest. I didn't feel quite stable holding her. So I asked Simon to hold her, and then they got her all wrapped up and stuff, and he held her while they finished doing whatever they were doing down there. And yeah, then I think it was about 9 o'clock that they were all finished, and I got wheeled into the little post-op recovery area. So yeah, the whole thing was just so quick. quick, easy, pain-free. Yeah, amazing.
And it sounds, even though like you're in this like obviously operating room and this hospital environment, but it sounded so relaxed, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
like it wasn't relaxing,
no,
but yeah, it was that like there's no way that they could have made it any like more comfortable for me
yes.
or stress-free. Like I
Yeah.
just throughout our whole process, all the staff everywhere have just been amazing. It's just so great that I got the people that I had been seeing in that room. Yeah.
And how did you go with post-op cesarean care? Because for me, that was like obviously the actual cesarean was quite a stressful kind of time, but for me, the next 48 hours was a hard work. Like it was, I was in agony,
Yeah.
and I remember for me as well, I get nauseous from like
Right.
any analgesia, so I just vomited like for 12 hours
Yeah.
straight. So then I still
Wow.
remember it so vividly. I had Maeve on one boob and then breastfeeding, holding my scar with a towel and then vomiting in the other hand.
Oh
Like
my
it was
gosh.
just, yeah, for 12 hours. Like it's, yeah, this is the real mummy. There's no glorifying
Yeah. Oh
that.
my God. Like your bits and your parts, like everyone sees everything. And
Oh my
yeah.
gosh. Yeah.
Look, I've found my recovery really easy. That day, I would just like, was lying in the bed trying to feed. We had a lot of feeding problems, so that didn't go very well. But, they would just routinely come in and like change this giant pad under my bum, and I didn't even really know that was there. But otherwise, like, I felt fine in myself. It was probably around 5 o'clock. I had mum, dad, and my sister, her partner, come and visit. And I just started feeling really nauseous then. And it was a beautiful moment. But yeah, then I like cleared the room out by chucking in a can next to the bed. I felt so nauseous.
It's probably your adrenaline as well, isn't it? Your hormones, your adrenaline, like.
Yeah, I was so tired, absolutely shattered. The food was awful. All I wanted was like a piece of toast or something, but like they couldn't get me. I think the menu that day was meatloaf. Like,
Oh,
who the hell wants meatloaf? I know that next time I'm gonna bring my own food. But
they need
yeah,
a special like diet for like, post birth, because I was the same after I remember Maisie, and I was like, can I just have a cup of tea and some toast? And they were
yeah,
so busy like cleaning up the birth room and all this, the delivery room, and they were like, oh yeah, yeah. But they bring you like this big roast dinner, and I'm like, that is the last thing I want to eat. Or like
and it's
even
like the frozen meal vibe.
I
It's
know,
not nice
even like the
stuff.
sandwiches and stuff. I'm just like, oh, like I just want something real basic. So
Yeah,
yeah, I feel
yeah,
like they
yeah.
need
I
like,
know for
yeah,
next.
yeah, I know.
So yeah, I had a bit of nausea towards the end of the day, but I say it would have been around 6 o'clock that like Simon and the midwife kind of like helped me hobble into the bathroom, and I had a shower in the shower chair. But I kind of could not, like, with not much support, I could kind of like hobble back to the bed by myself. And that night, I feel like I remember just Lily being really fussy. She wouldn't go down to sleep in the little bassinet. And so, Simon and I were both shattered. He was sleeping on the little couch thing. I would get up to her, and I could get out of my bed, take a few steps to the bassinet, pick her up, and I would take her back to the bed with me.
Mhm.
And I just kind of like sat there holding her. So yeah, that night I could get up and kind of move a bit around the room. The next day was about the same kind of thing. Then, yeah, we had a bunch happen, and which kind of like forced me, like, I guess, beyond the recovery thing, where we did end up having to do an emergency flight to Perth. And, I had to walk from like the car park to the NICU and from our room down to, that was like day
Oh my
3.
gosh, after a cesarean. Because they're funny about you even like when you leave. They're funny about you even like walking out. Sometimes they'll be like, go in a wheelchair. But so
Yeah,
what
no,
happened
I
to
had to.
what happened to Lily? Why did she get flown to Perth?
So she had jaundice, which is so funny. I must have just had rose tinted glasses on, because I remember Simon being like on day 2, like, do you think she looks a bit yellow? And I was like, no, she's perfect.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the next day she was even more yellow. I look back at photos now, she's like a little Simpsons baby. And She's so yellow. And I couldn't see it.
Yeah.
Couldn't see it at all. But they kept doing tests on her bilirubin levels, and they said, that they were high, but they thought it was kind of within normal ranges. And then it was on the Sunday. So she was born Friday morning. So yeah, she's 2 days old, coming into her third day. The way that Bustleton Hospital works is they have like a rotating roster of the GPOs that come in. It happened to be my GPO, Jasna, who was rostered on that day. And they'd done another blood test on Lily and said, yep, levels are high. And they'd also realized that she had a different blood group to me, which then put her in a higher risk.
Oh, wow.
And she goes, yeah, apparently, like according to Google, because, they have to process all the bilirubin out of their body, but also because we have different blood types. Towards the end of my pregnancy, my body would have seen her as a foreign object and started hitting her with more red blood cells to almost like eject her. So she had like double amount of stuff to process out of her system. So that's why the different blood type put her in the higher category. Anyway, the doctor Jasna goes, oh, I'm just going to call the specialist in Perth and just see what they think. And I'm like, cool, I'm just going to go fill up my water bottle in the like communal kitchenette area. It was like 5 meters away. And I come back and she's like, we've chartered a flight. Yeah, she needs to go to Perth. And yeah, Royal Flying Doctors were already on their way down. Yeah, the whole thing was just crazy. Mum and Dad were on their way down from Bunbury for a visit. And we called and we're like, we might not be here when you arrive. But everything was, it was extremely stressful and emotional time. But just like everyone was just so amazing. So I think it was about 2 p.m. The Royal Flying Doctors had arrived, I think within like half an hour of them putting in the call. And they'd moved her into the little special care unit. They've got one little crib in Bustleton and they had her under the blue lights. But the Royal Flying Doctors had the big, the big crib that they take them in. It's like a little spaceship coffin type thing, this big spaceship thing. And she had to have these like little goggles on. Oh, they're so cute, these little headphones. So she was under the lights basically immediately, and they were trying to organise everything for her arrival and for her admission into hospital. They'd also organised, because we're regional, for us to stay at the hospital as well, which was just incredible.
Wow.
We were like 10 meters from her bed. Our room was like 10 meters from her bed. It was amazing. So we could be with her every minute of the day, basically. They discharged me. I had to sign some stuff saying that I was like voluntarily discharging myself, which was fine. They said I could be assigned to another hospital, but I'd have to go to Fiona Stanley and she'll be at Perth Children's, so I wouldn't be at the same hospital, and they're like quite far away from each other. So I was happy to just get discharged, and they gave me a bunch of pain meds and stuff. Unfortunately, we weren't allowed on the flight with her, which was quite emotional. So it was a really difficult time, but they assured us that, they were under the best care. And the doctors on the Royal Flying Doctors flight, they were amazing. They actually took videos of her on the flight and sent them to us. Yeah, because we had to drive to Perth, which is, 3 hours.
Yeah.
And so they sent us videos, they sent us texts when they arrived, all these things. It was just like their care and everything was amazing. And luckily, like Mum and Dad, who were coming down to visit us in Bustleton, they kind of arrived just as it all was happening. So we had that support around us as well. Really funny, not funny, but I remember like being just an absolute wreck and going past the little kitchenette area, and there was this other lady with her baby, and I just remember thinking like, why does this lady get to go home with her baby but I don't? Anyway, this lady ended up being on my mother's group. And it's a really nice like full circle moment. We at the park yesterday actually together, but it's nice. But anyway, we drove to Perth, and although we thought that was going to be hard not being on the plane,
Mm.
was actually quite a good time for us to really like debrief
Yeah.
everything. We realized it was, shared with us quite a lot, and it just took a bit for us to sink in that, you know, while it seemed like a massive emergency, it wasn't. It was just
Mhm.
all super precautionary.
Yeah.
Because I was saying, like, why can't we just go to Bunbury? Like, that's
Yeah.
45 minutes away and I could stay with my parents. And they're like, well, but what if we find out that there's another reason? Like, let's just get straight to the place where she can get the most care just in case something's not right. But like most of the time, she'll just be under the lights and you'll be home in a few days. Like, it
Yeah.
was very like, we are just being so proportionate,
Yeah.
And so that was good, gave us time to debrief, and we talked to Simon's parents on the phone and on the way up and stuff. Yeah, and I think we got there at about 10 o'clock at night. And just as we were, it must have been before then, 7 or something, just as we were arriving, one of the doctors who'd been on the plane was leaving. And she said she was just finishing her shift. And she said, oh, let me like take you to her room. And so that was really nice. Just like the care from everyone was amazing.
Yeah.
And she was just in this, in the NICU, like in this room where there was these 4 little cribs with the craziest technology I've ever seen. They're like in these massive machine things hanging over them. It's quite intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
And it was quite difficult because she couldn't leave the lights. We couldn't breastfeed. We were already having a lot of breastfeeding problems. So I was having to pump and then they would tube feed it to her. And that continued for like a day. And then they said that her levels had come down enough that she could come away from those like crazy machines. And she kind of just went into a normal room with some little lights. And we continued that for about 3 or 4 days before we finally got the all clear to come home. But it was definitely like a crazy emotional time. And every day when we're waiting for the doctor to do their rounds to see if we could come home, and the answer was like, oh, I just want to see how her weight is tomorrow, because the weight has a lot to do with how they process everything as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it just was like, we can't go home today. And then you get really upset, and then you'd be hoping again for the next day. And yeah, it was just a crazy, crazy time. But yeah, so I think we got home on her 6th or 7th day, I think. But what was really nice is like the Busselton Hospital were like, if, you go to Perth and it's been a really crazy time, it's quite a lot to go from that to settling straight in at home. If you want, you can come back to the Busselton Hospital for a few nights and we can kind of help you transition.
Oh,
So it was so beautiful of them to offer that to us.
yeah.
At that point in time, we just wanted to be home. But like every midwife, every doctor, everyone just felt like immediate family, like the way they had treated us. Even my doctor, Jasna, when we left, like she was crying and she gave me a big hug. And when we were in Perth, she gave me a call just to check in and see how we were going. Like just every single person that we came across, we just had the like most amazing care between Busselton, Perth, Royal Flying Doctors. Everyone have been amazing. So we're so grateful really for the experience. So it was a whirlwind, but it was a very interesting experience at the same time.
And what like the first week into motherhood. Like it's hard enough, I suppose, becoming a first-time mum. It's enough of a shock. It's enough of a thing. But that for your first week of becoming a mum, like, what a week.
But I feel like almost this is where, like, I had the cruisy pregnancy and then I just had this first little hiccup of the breech and then this thing happened. And then, oh my God, the breastfeeding afterwards, like the next 8 weeks were the hardest and longest weeks of my life with breastfeeding, and we were triple feeding and pumping and only getting 20 minutes sleep at a time. Like that has been the hardest thing out of everything. When it's your first, you have no idea what to experience. So you're always so focused on the birth, and I was so focused on the birth. And so many people told me, no, it's about what comes afterwards.
Yeah.
And, I had done those wax courses on breastfeeding, but you can't, figure out how to do it until you're there. so all this stuff is like the C-section for me is like almost the most delightful part of the whole thing. It was so easy, it was so straightforward. And then just like it just all rumbled after that. Yeah,
I
it's
think
crazy.
I was the same as a first time mum. I was so kind of focused on the birth, and I had all these ideals of how I wanted to birth and how, I wanted the first 24 hours to go. And I was the same as you. I always wanted to breastfeed, and I'd done some classes, not a lot, but, I kind of like read the books, listened to things. But at the end of the day, I was like, it's the most natural thing. Like, if you want to breastfeed, you can do it. Like, this is the most natural thing. We're born to do this. And I was like, thinking, now I look back, I just want to slap myself and be like,
yeah.
So
but honestly, like a similar situation about the whole with birth, trying to keep it natural, that kind of thing. I've heard a lot of the trend as well at the moment, and rightfully so, is that, don't put too much pressure on things. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Like, if you need to go formula, then that's fine. Or if you need to do whatever works for you and your family. And I knew in my head, and I was like, I'm not going to put that much pressure on myself. And then it got to the moment, and I pushed myself so hard to like breaking point number of times. And I thought, if this were any other person in my mother's group or a friend, I would have given them so much more grace than what I gave myself.
Oh, 100%.
But I don't know why. And I feel like now I know, like, next time round, I wouldn't put myself through that again, to that extent. But it's a weird thing that it's like I accept and I acknowledge that this is a thing that we're not going to take it too far. We're going to be easy on ourselves and all that kind of thing. But when push comes to shove, you just are so determined to get things right.
Yeah.
And like almost had too much support. Like, I told the doctors and I told the midwives and I told the lactation consultants that I wanted to breastfeed, and they were like, right, well, let's make this happen. Then it got to like week 6, I think, and my doctor was like, you can just mix feed. And even if she just like gets like 10 mil and then you do a top up of formula, then that's totally fine. And it was just, again, that like weight off my shoulders that someone was always giving me permission. But because I'd said, this is what I want to do, everyone went gung ho. And then finally, when it wasn't really working, my doctor was like, you don't have to. I was like, oh, thank God.
That was me. That was me the first time around. I remember trying so hard, and Maisie was the same. I had to use the nipple shields. She was just a terrible feeder, just like, absolutely shocking. And it wasn't enjoyable 6 weeks. And I remember she wasn't putting on weight. And I actually, it's funny about the jaundice. Maisie was actually a real jaundice baby, but she was always kind of borderline. So they never really had to have any interventions. But the older she was getting, and I didn't realize looking at her, I was just like, oh, she's got a beautiful color. But now look at the photos, I'm like, oh my God, she was really jaundiced. Like, her eyes were like yellow.
Yeah.
But it was never like to the point, like, they were like, oh, like, put her in the sun, let her sleep in the sun, all these things.
Yeah.
And then I obviously didn't have enough milk, but I was so pushing this whole natural, trying to eat. I was like, I need to eat this, drinking the milk teas, having the milk biscuits, baking this, doing this to increase my milk supply. I tried everything, and it got to 6 weeks, and I saw the child health nurse, and she hasn't put on much weight, and I burst into tears. I was like, I literally don't know what more I can do. Yeah. And she was like, maybe you should start doing a top-up feed, get some formula and top her up and do a bit of both. And then I was like, oh, I'm okay to do that. And she was like, yes. And same as you, I just felt this relief. And then obviously then once she started, within 2 weeks, she was having the formula. Then by then, I barely had any milk. I kind of, by 8 weeks, I kind of stopped. But even that, the first time I kind of opened it in formula, I was crying with relief and guilt. It was kind of this, and it was the guilt I put on myself. It wasn't, no one else was saying or suggesting anything. It was me that would, I didn't buy any bottles. I didn't buy any formula, none of that. Because whereas second time around, I had it all ready to go. I had the bottles out, the sterilizer, the formula. Yeah. And I was like, if I can breastfeed, I can. If I can't, I can't. And my breastfeeding worked a dream. I breastfed till she was 8 months old. Yeah. So it was just so different.
Yeah. I mean, I always had the tin of formula just in case, and we needed it pretty early on. But yeah, I triple fed for 8 weeks, pretty much every 3 hours. Because the same kind of thing when we first got home from hospital in Perth, this is one thing is initially when we were in Perth for jaundice, it was like we've got to do every 3 hours to try and flush out the bilirubin.
Mm-hmm.
But then when we were kind of like just in her like little crib area room rather than in the hectic area, they were like, "Oh, are you planning on feeding on demand?" And I get what feeding on demand means, but I didn't really understand what it meant.
Mm-hmm.
And so then when we got home, I was feeding on demand. I'll be like, she's crying. So I'd put her on. She'd feed for like 2 hours.
Mm.
And then she'd come off and cry. And then I'd put her back on again. And I'm like, what is going on? And then the child health nurse came around and she was losing weight. And then it was like, oh, okay, no, we need to be back on the 3 hourly thing. Like we just weren't educated around
That was amazing.
those
She
kinds
would
of
take
things.
45 minutes to feed on one side and then another. So it was an hour and a half. And then
Yeah.
after then half an hour, she was hungry again. And because obviously she was using the energy and exact same
Yes.
thing. And then I remember when I had Maeve and she literally would like 20 minutes, she was done. And I was like, what? That can't be right. That can't be right.
Yeah.
And I was like, and then there was one point, like she'd like literally drain one boob in 7 minutes, another boob, bam, done. And I was
Yeah.
just like, this is just insane. But you just don't know. And I agree, there's not enough education about that. And like sometimes I'm very much like a logical science person. I'm like, look, just tell me exactly what I need to do. What's normal, what's not. Like, it's just, and there's never that. Obviously, breastfeeding is not black and white anyway, but it's just, It's so
I mean, we
hard.
kind of had the two issues where like Lily had a poor latch, but a lot of it I just felt like, I felt like we had the Caesar, she was breech, maybe she wasn't ready to be born. One lactation consultant said to us that babies don't really develop that like suck swallow reflex until they're like 45, 48 weeks. So like a few weeks after they're born. Because so when they're born earlier by C-section or if they're early or whatever, they take longer to develop that skill. And I just feel like maybe she wasn't ready. She was small, she had a small mouth, she couldn't latch, but then I also had so I got pain and then I had really poor supply. And I feel like a lot of that also came from like, we had all of this crazy medical stuff that happened afterwards where we couldn't feed and do skin as much, that maybe that impacted. And then it just kind of like both of those issues like rolled into another. So then I was pumping after every feed, taking medication, doing all the things, and it just went on forever and a day. And then I think it was around 6 weeks, Lily finally got a bit more strength and she was actually taking some milk in. And we were very lucky that we got to the point where we could breastfeed probably like 80% of the feeds and the rest of the formula. I was so done with pumping. I'm like never hearing that pump ever again in my life.
That noise.
Awful. I just felt literally like a cow tied to my bed. I couldn't leave. It was a really, really tough time. But I think now, like, if I go for another one, that I know a lot more about like how to let them latch, like the breast crawl for us. We tried that around 2-3 weeks of age and that worked really well. And I just, like you said, I don't think I did the courses. They talk about like different latch positions. It's so hard unless you have a baby there.
And
but I think also the other techniques around like how to increase supply, like your pumping and how often they need to be fed, like how long they should be feeding for. A lot of that is kind of not really discussed, I don't feel. But now, like, I mean, been a blessing in disguise because while it was like the hardest thing I've ever had to do, I know so much more for next time. And then also it allowed us to mix feed. I could have a wine at lunch, so I could do a bottle at night. It made our life so much easier. Doing the mixed feeding, really flexible, was fantastic. So it was a blessing in disguise in the end. But then it got to a point like 6, 7 months old, Lily was just not about it. She did not want the boob. She was always trying to, anytime I'd put her in that position, just climbing out of it. And I was like, I worked pretty hard to get here. Give me about this boob. I was just using the boob to kind of resettle asleep. probably 7 months onwards, so barely anything. And then yeah, I think it was maybe 10 months that we had our last feed. But yeah, she had teeth by that point, so I was kind of done anyway.
Oh, I know. It's, yeah, like I said, that pregnancy, birth, and
Mm,
breastfeeding. For me, if like everyone's like, what's the hardest to me? It's breastfeeding.
breastfeeding.
100%. It's breastfeeding. That's
And I
like a
know
whole thing in
so many
itself.
people have issues with it, but I don't think they like, and literally it's almost every single person
Hmm.
that I know has had a baby. I would say like 95% of them have had really difficult breastfeeding
Yeah.
journeys. And I just feel like that kind of statistic is not
No.
talked about enough.
And I think as well, it doesn't like it doesn't help. Like you don't really hear about these. Obviously, at all the antenatal classes and the hospitals and stuff, they don't really tell you how hard it is because they obviously want you to do it, which is it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great, but they don't. It kind of, I feel like they don't educate you on just how difficult it's gonna be, and like that it's kind
Yeah.
of like I remember I was talking to Leah, who's a breast consultant, and
Mm.
she was saying like it's a learned skill, like it's not something you're like born to. You have to learn how to do it, and so does
Mhm.
baby. So it's not just something you're like, oh, which I thought it was. I literally thought like, I'll just pop baby on, but she's not. It's like you have to learn, like, and so does baby.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think for me as well, because I was the first one out of all of us, to have a baby.
Yes.
So I didn't
Mm.
have anyone, no one I knew had breastfed, so I didn't have anyone I could talk to.
Mm.
And, then later on, as you start talking to mums and like about breastfeeding, they're like, oh, wow, like, yeah, like I said, I don't know anyone. And like even a
Yeah.
friend, Luca, she's a midwife, and even she struggled here and there.
Yeah.
And with like, is he getting enough? Is he latching
Yeah.
okay? And even a midwife is still seeing a lactation consultant. So yeah, but yeah. So obviously you've had a long journey of motherhood, and yeah. So little Lily,
Yes. I feel like that is the same for everyone though. Like it's as much as it's amazing and they bring you so much joy. It's so hard. Far out, so hard. But you wouldn't change it, of course.
oh God, no,
Um,
no,
yeah, so no, it's yeah, but I feel like all of that has kind of set us up for, anything moving forward. Even just I think I know some people in my mother's group or whatever who've gone, oh, this happened and we had to take him to ED. And I think it sounds like a really stressful situation, but like now that we've been through all of that, it's not
yeah,
it's not a stressful situation. You just take him there, they'll see him, like,
yeah.
it'll get worked out. It just brings a lot of perspective to things, I think. Um, yeah.
Definitely, and you've stayed kind of positive about it, and it didn't affect you, and it didn't. I suppose it didn't taint your motherhood journey either. Like you've still obviously talk about it with a smile on
No,
your face.
yeah. No, that's it. I mean, God, I just so much happens. It's a bloody roller coaster over time.
And you'd still do it
Pregnancy
again,
and
wouldn't you?
having
Like
a
tomorrow.
baby and stuff. I literally forgot that like we had such a terrible time with sleep around 5, 6 months that like I got postnatal depression and anxiety. But
Yeah.
anyway, we've recovered from that. But it's another like thing that happens, you just have these like moments where everything's going really well and then it gets really tough and
Mhm.
you just got to try and like call on the people and your supports and
Yeah.
put things. I think that's the thing as well that I learned in those early weeks is that like I would push myself to a point before I would try and seek help.
Mhm.
That like, you got to catch things early because, in the health system, it can take weeks before you can get an appointment, all these kinds of things. And you just, as soon as you see something, you just like jump on it. You don't need to be embarrassed about it or whatever. You just get onto it. And I think that's definitely like a lesson learned moving forward.
Definitely. And it's okay to admit it. And I still find that there's such a stigma around postnatal depression and postnatal anxiety. And that's another strong reason I wanted to do this podcast as well, because I suffered with postnatal depression after
Mm.
having Maeve, my youngest. And I remember like it was one of them things. And I remember someone said to me, they're like, but I'm so surprised because, you have a really hands-on husband. My mum is around the corner, she's healthy. You've got nothing to worry about. And I was like, that's exactly it. It can't be helped. It is one of those things. And
Yeah.
it's something there shouldn't be that kind of stigma. And it's a lot of women
Yeah.
have it. And it's, I was the same as you. I kind of left it a bit longer than I should have to try and get it seen to. But yeah, it's something that we need to talk about. And yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the thing. That's when you know that something's not right. Hey, like everything's going really well, but it's still not right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It was just one of them things. And like, I was like, it's the baby blues. It's the baby blues. 6 months later, it was just
yeah, 6 months.
6 months later, it was just
It's a 6 month sleep regression that did us. So I was
my
done.
God. It was just like, it was just, it was hard work. But and like I still find I was like, like, but now I think I look back, I look back in a different, like I said, I look back in a different way. Like I was like, I talk about it. And then I'll be like about the newborn stage, how beautiful it was. And then hubby is just like, can you not remember? Like, do you not
I
remember?
actually can't remember. I think
we're programmed
first
not to
8 weeks
remember.
was so traumatic. I'm so traumatic the first 8 weeks that I can't remember the newborn stage. And now I have friends with newborns and like I can't be around newborns because
I know.
I was too lucky. Our dad can't be near them. And I feel like I've almost missed out on, that phase because I don't remember much of it.
Yeah.
Well, I always want to do it again just so I can try and savor it a bit more, but I'm sure it'll be just as hard as the first time around.
100%. To be honest, I didn't find it as hard second time around. It was still hard because I had a toddler as well, but like it was actually easier like newborn because you're a more relaxed mum. You kind of know what you're doing, and obviously when you have a toddler, a newborn is a breeze. It's very much like, no, Dad, you take the toddler. I'll stay home with the newborn.
That's it.
They're a dream. But like I would just, even with that horrific birth I had, I would still just keep having babies. I would 100%.
Yeah.
So if there's any mums now that obviously they've been told that they're going to have their baby is breech, and they have the decision to kind of obviously do an ECV or they're booking a caesarean in, is there kind of any bit of advice as a mum yourself that you would give to them, and that you could even go back in time and tell yourself, is there any kind of bit of advice you would give?
The only thing I can say is just like, you got to do what feels right for you. I mean, an ECV, it's uncomfortable, but it's not the worst pain in the world. You can get through it. It's fine. If you want to try that, you can. If you don't want to, then that's also completely fine. And I know, because I had so many people in my family who had cesarean sections, are like, oh, it's super chill, it's fine. But you can't until you've been through that and knowing that you're going to get cut open and there's going to be a baby at the end. I think you don't know how it's going to feel until you're there. I would say make a very soothing, relaxing playlist. I had these songs that I used to listen to, even throughout uni or high school, whatever, that I used to use to get to sleep. So I associate them all with just being extremely relaxed and sleepy. That helped you get through, support people there. And I think for me, I'm like a visual person. So knowing how the day is, how the thing's got to pan out. So hopefully this provides a bit of that context, because I could not find anything out there about people's experiences with an elective C-section, only emergency ones, and they're all horror stories. So hopefully this helps a little bit, but otherwise just try and make the most of it. Use that date that you have to prepare your house and prepare yourself and have fun and relax as much as you can before this crazy little alien enters your life.
I know, before the real journey begins.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Sonya, and sharing your birth story. And like I said, it's refreshing to have a nice cesarean story, because I don't know
Yes.
any other ones. I've never met anyone else that's got a nice cesarean story. So it's
fantastic.
It's lovely to hear.
If anyone is weighing up the option, because whether they're nervous about whatever, for whatever reason, or for mental health reasons, just do it. It's so great, and you'll thank yourself for saving yourself any of that trauma. So yeah, it's been really great to share it.
Thank you so much, Son. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Real Mummy podcast. Remember, every mum's journey is unique and you are doing an amazing job. Please be sure to head over to our website at www.realmummypodcast.com to stay up to date with the latest episodes and dive into our recent blog articles filled with even more wisdom and stories. We absolutely love connecting with our listeners, so don't forget to follow us on social media. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter at Real Mummy Podcast. Join the conversation, share your thoughts, and become part of our supportive mum community. And I'd love to hear from you. Have you got a topic you want covered? Do you have a guest you'd love to hear from? Reach out to us through our website or social media. Your input is invaluable and helps us to create the content that matters most to you. Thank you for being part of the Real Mummy podcast family. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind to yourself, and remember, you're never alone on this journey. You've got this.